Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of A Contagious Smile. This one you might want to get your Kleenexes for because this one hits really hard and hits at home for a lot of us. Sean is here and he's going to give us a perspective that we've never had on the show. And I hate that we have to have it. I'm so glad it's coming from you. But he is the spouse of a survivor, because I hate the word victim, of abuse and sexual violence. Sean, thank you so much for finding the time to come on and talk with us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I can't thank you enough. So, you yourself are a Navy vet. Thank you for your service. I truly appreciate it. You know, everyone who has ever spoken with me knows that I was attacked and beaten by my former military spouse. And I always say this little disclosure that I don't believe all military is bad at all. I appreciate and respect them. My husband now is, he was Air Force. So, and he was law enforcement, and they actually hated each other, which was hysterical. But anyway, so I have utmost respect, but like I say, there's not always great 100% across the board. And obviously I got the really crappy part of the board.
Mm.
So your wife was a victim. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened to her?
Yeah, 2 weeks after her and I started dating, she got sexually assaulted by, quote, a friend of hers. And it turned out that he had sexually assaulted 6, 7 other girls in the friend group. And when all of that came to light, my wife, girlfriend at the time, decided that she was going to be the last one. And
Good for her.
we went through the criminal court, we went through the civil court, trying to get a sexual assault restraining order. He just lived down the street. He had, they had been friends for a while. He and his wife were, a pretty big part of my wife's friend group and circle. And they had kind of, he had just done a lot of really manipulative things to, kind of get this group of people around him, and, used just really kind of slimy tactics of, using a self-diagnosis of Asperger's to hide some of the behaviors that were just really creepy ways of infiltrating somebody's life. And so there was just this time where it was really kind of scary because he had so much kind of influence and contact with all of these women in their lives. And so we went through the court system, and the court system absolutely failed on so many levels. And it was just incredibly traumatic to not only have gone through this abuse, but then have to go through the court trials like
It's
right
abuse all over
afterwards.
again.
And it's just trauma. Yeah, exactly.
All
And
over
they
again.
they don't do they don't do anything for the survivor.
No.
There's no real compassion. I mean, I remember sitting in court. One of the more difficult times in that whole process was going to court, sitting there in just a pew, and me and her brother, who is a Marine, and so my wife and her brother are sitting there, and right in front of us is the guy that abused her and his lawyer, like just sitting right there. There was no separation. There's no kind of concept or thought process that, hey, people that get abused shouldn't have to sit in the proximity of their abuser where that guy could literally just turn around and put hands on. Like,
Right.
it's one of those things that they just don't consider at all in terms of the safety. There wasn't even a bailiff in this courtroom. There was no feeling of security whatsoever. And it just feels like a massive failure to protect on so many levels, And then having the King County Prosecutor's Office drop the case, when 7 girls came forward to file charges of, all sorts of assault. And it was just crazy. And then to know that he's out there, this is just a part of his behavior, that he went out and immediately was already collecting a new group of people to kind of do that abuse. And we heard through friends of friends, through different organizations that he was a part of, that he had been, doing all this creepy behavior and got kicked out of this place and this place. So, it's just getting passed around, and then more people are being abused. And that's kind of what led me in terms of the passion to speak up and speak out about this, is just that we keep continuing to know these environments exist, know these predators are out there, and all these people know, but we're not doing anything about it. And so the problem I ran into was just there's no real deterrent, really. Like, sure, there's laws on the books, but if we don't actually hold people accountable, then what are we doing? There's no real deterrent there. And I think one of the organizations, RAINN, it's a Rape and Incest National Network. They have a stat that basically says that 97 to 98% of people who are accused and even convicted, like, only, will never see a day in jail. And so it's just one of those things that's like, okay, we have all these laws on the books. We say we don't like this. We create TV shows that are specifically around, like, Detective Stabler going out and, Olivia fighting all these crimes, and Ice-T going out and, removing all these predators. But, like, the reality of it, like, the on the deck plate in, like, real world, like, that doesn't exist. Like, there's no compassion. Like, these investigators were very cold, very judgmental. It was just trauma from day one, from the time that she was abused to all the way through the court process, was just cold-heartedness. It just was like people could give a shit less that you just went through in a horrific ordeal. And that just needs to change, really. It's something that I feel like, there's too many perspectives out there that make it seem like this is just not a thing. And so I just had to stand up and start screaming about it.
What was their reason for dropping the case?
The same reason, unfortunately, that so many cases get dropped in this space, is that they just don't feel like it's a winnable case, quote, whatever the fuck that means. But, like, right, exactly. So do you have some, because the problem, and I'm sure with your legal background, you understand, is that when you get into the district attorney position, they have political ambitions, potentially, that they have to protect their record. And so they can't start taking on what they believe are going to be losing cases, even if it's the right thing to do, because they have a future to a conflict of interest, really. And, and that's all over the country. There's just massive conflicts of interest when it comes to eliminating this type of behavior and actually exposing it. And, it's horrible at every level.
Right. I've got to get you on Unstoppable, because here's the thing that bothers me so much. For a police officer, the most dangerous call to go on is domestic violence. You get to the scene, and let's say you approach, and there's a woman and there's a man, and the woman says he beat me, he hit me, whatever, but she has marks and he has marks. So now they take them both, which is just absurd. So you go in there, and what about the fact that could be defense wounds on him, where she tried to push him off, where she tried to scratch her way away from him, where, she tried to save her life. And the fact that more women are incarcerated for the self-defense against their abusers than the abusers themselves is ludicrous. I mean, that's infuriating to me, that, I felt this way, and I've advocated for so many women and helped them in their court proceedings. It's literally what hurts me, Sean, is the fact that not only have we as survivors already been through it, but we're put through it again. And it's really the burden of the defendant to prove they're innocent. But the whole time they're attacking us again. It's, well, why did you make him do it? Or what did he do? And it's, why do we have to relive it where the laws are in favor of the attacker? They really are. I truly believe that, and I'm trying desperately to get this out there. I want a domestic violence, registry. And people are like, well, that's, no, we have a child predator registry. We have, pedophile registry, sex offender registry. Why can't we do one for domestic violence? I mean, why can't we? Because the attacker kills part of that survivor, and that's never going to come back. It's like one of those school shooters just said, please don't put me through lethal injection. That's inhumane. Okay, you little 15-year-old, what was it when you went to school and you shot the colleagues that you were in school with and center mass, and now they can't get married, they can't have a family, they can't walk down the aisle to their soulmate. That's inhumane, but you want to beg for your life about going to sleep? Like, that is really hard for me, because it's like, and then you get told that when you come in, is the families cannot give an impact statement under certain parameters. They can only say certain things. Well, maybe those families need closure, but you're being told by a court, well, you can't say this and you can't say that, and it's inhumane to, to put them to sleep. What about the people that go through this?
Totally. And I feel like that's one of the biggest frustrations when you look at the legal system is that it seems that it's set up to protect abusers in a way that they the whole time from the jump, from the moment they abuse and create this harm and trauma in somebody's life, they are innocent until they're presumed innocent until they're proven guilty. And
they're
yet
never proven guilty.
when somebody has this abuse happen, they're actually a liar until they can prove themselves to be truthful. And it just is such a backward system that just inherent in how it's built and its design is built to protect abuse just from the ground up. That's how it was. I mean, it's literally how it was designed to work, because that's, like, that's what it does. And it works perfectly in that space. And so, like, when we think about it in that way, it has to, we have to approach it differently. There's no way that we can, continue to move forward in a society and expect that this doesn't continue to become a problem when there's no deterrence for these types of things, right? All of the crimes that are kind of in this ecosystem, like stalking, domestic violence, sexual violence, like all of it exists in this world where we are required to be reactive and there's nothing we can do proactively. And so then there's no deterrent for actually committing this crime. And so if we were to just take that for a second and look at a different crime and say, what if murder? What if 98% of all murderers who are convicted, spotted by an eyewitness and even more eyewitnesses, and they got away with it all the time? How much more murder would actually be taking place? Right? Same thing if it was car theft, right? How much more grand theft auto would there be if 98% of the people out there stealing cars who were caught red-handed in the act of doing it never actually faced any punishment for it? Like, how much more car theft would there be? And it's like, when we approach it in that space, it's like, no wonder there's so much sexual violence. No wonder there's so much domestic violence. No wonder there's so much like really creepy behavior that we just kind of allow this idea of, well, my hands are tied and I can't do anything about it. And it's like, but the individual is the system. Like, the individual can change the system because they're a part of it. We can, if there was enough political will, and that's the frustrating part about it, is that, with an inept political system where, we're just so divided on every issue that we can't get any solutions to anything because it takes both sides to actually get the political will to change it. It's just, it's so unfortunate in the time that we live in that this is where we're at, because it's like our political system, the people we elect, I have zero faith that they're going to create any kind of actual change, because they just sit on their hands. They're like, oh, sorry, it's an election year. I don't want to talk about this, serious issue. So let's just punt it and kick the can down the road. And then, what that means in my head is thousands and thousands and thousands more survivors are going to get created. And, in the realm of sexual violence, that means, thousands and thousands more partners are going to be in a situation where they have zero clue what they're getting into. And, that it's just so unfortunate that we have organized our society this way.
Absolutely. So you were with your girlfriend only 2 weeks when this happened.
Yeah.
Is the scum person who did this, what did his wife do when all this was going on? Let me guess, she stood by him.
No, actually, to be honest, she, I mean, this is what's crazy. The evidence is overwhelming to like anybody like that's logical thinking and actually has a heart and compassionate. Like, the evidence was crazy. So she was like out,
Good for her.
Yeah, she had because the problem that she ran into was that it was a different type of abuse that was going on, the psychological kind of abuse that was happening within the context of their relationship. I don't really want to like necessarily speak to a lot of that, but it was more so just in the perspective that somebody's being psychologically abused to kind of be the buffer.
Right. I was thinking he was going in saying that they're just making this up because they wanted him or whatever. And she stood, a lot of times the women stand by them. So good for her.
And she was, and for a long time, she was kind of put in a position to, be a shield of his, Asperger diagnosis. That was like, oh, that's why he just, upon first meeting you, just grabbed your phone and put his name in your contacts and called himself from your phone so he'd have your contact information before. Like, there was just like breaches of boundaries constantly. I mean, just from the jump. So there's all these red flags, but it's passed off because immediately you're given this, oh, well, he has Asperger's, it's okay. So it's like it was just from the jump, they were just using this, kind of self-diagnosis as a way of just, hiding the behavior that obviously everybody else was kind of looking at being like, this is weird. And yeah, it was a really bad time. It was really hard, kind of processing through
You
all of
stayed
that.
with her and you'd only been dating her 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was, we had been friends for 4 years before that. And, our relationship we approached before we even decided that we were going to start dating. We sat down one night and we did this questionnaire that was like 36 questions that like goes super deep. And because we had, our online dating horror stories and things. And
Right.
we were kind of confiding in each other one day about it. And we just kind of like, after talking, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, what about this? Why don't we give, we want the same things out of life. We share a
Right.
lot of the same values. So what if we gave this a shot? And we're like, well, I don't want to destroy a friendship. So she pulled out this, like, she found this questionnaire that just asks like super deep, like real complex questions that like really get to know somebody. And by the end of the night, it'd probably been 4 hours of this like incredibly deep conversation. We just decided like, whoa, okay, like this really works. It's like, this isn't something that we're just rushing into. And so when, 2 weeks later, when that happened, it was like, there was already a commitment
Yeah.
that was just so true that it was like, I'm ride or die here in this moment. And this wasn't the first time that I've been through this, right? My first girlfriend in high school, I was, she was abused when she was a child. And she was actually had intimate partner violence where she was raped at knife point multiple times by this guy in junior high. And so when we got together, it bubbled up into our relationship, and it was something that we had to face in that relationship as well. And so I kind of had already known a little bit about, like at least what to expect, so I could make a more informed decision about like how to show up and what was ahead of me.
Sean, how do you show up as a partner?
Ooh, well, that's what the entire book is really about. Is really trying to be as compassionate and open as possible, right? Like really understanding that the environment that we create, just as individuals, but in the context of our relationship, is so important. Meaning, every single moment that you show up and you're there in their presence, you are having an impact on their environment. You're having an impact on the vibe and the feeling, the context, the safety, the security, the trust that they have. And every conversation is just a micro example and in a micro situation of being able to influence that environment. And so how I show up now is with a very conscious understanding and a proactive approach to the energy I'm bringing into any particular situation, is recognizing that my emotional state is going to have an impact into every room I walk into. And we all recognize that when somebody walks in and they just have an incredible, bubbly, bouncy energy and the whole room magnetizes to them. Like you realize that in these moments of your life. But sometimes there's this temptation that we put that impact on like other people that are like the showy people, the real boisterous personalities. But that's actually a falsehood, because we all do that. We all have that impact. And so it's really being conscious of the energy you bring to every moment that I think is how you start the process of showing up. And then from there, we just build upon it, like with a lot of the skill sets I talk about in the book.
How's your wife doing today?
She's doing really well. Yeah, she's I always struggle to say she's like healed, because that's not really on me to say. But we do have this conversation a lot, and she's at a really great place.
Good for her.
The triggering events are much fewer and farther between. The impact that the emotional things, because life is just the way that it is. We live in our society. Sexual violence is unfortunately all over the place and everywhere, in media and movies and TV shows and everything. And at the very beginning, it was a very traumatic thing for her to see and witness. And I think it speaks volumes to how far she's come. to
And
where
because she
now,
had you
right.
an amazing.
And now she's at a place where, you know, I think the growth is that she's, you know, at a place where it doesn't have that same physiological reaction. She processes it in a much different way that's not so reliving her own kind of past memories all the time, which is really great. And she's, you know, really, I think, gotten to a place of understanding and processing and kind of reconciling a lot to get an inner strength and an inner courage to stand up and help and recognize that, you know, her sense of purpose is to be the best therapist that she can be and help as many people as possible. And the way that, you know, she can do that to the highest ability is to really focus on, you know, getting better in every way possible. So I from my perspective, she's just one of the most incredible people I know.
That is so sweet. And she's been very lucky to have you, and you seem very understanding. What can you tell other people who are partners that have their significant other going through the survival process to help them in their position in this situation? How can you give them words of advice to try to make things easier for them?
Yeah, in the book, I talk about some, you know, ideas that you can implement and execute, kind of strategies of what to do in a particular moment that's challenging. And they, on the surface, they sound simple, and in practice they take a lot of practice. But the three things that I kind of talk about are being able to just listen, just be there. Um, it's one of the more challenging things that I think we can do as human beings, is to hear somebody's pain, hear somebody's struggle, hear somebody's challenge that they're going through, and not want to interject ourselves into the situation by providing some sort of solution. And so really just active listening is something that I think is a really important skill set, to just get comfortable in the discomfort of the silence. And one of the things that I say often when somebody shares something like that with me is, thank you for sharing, because it allows me to provide my own sense of gratitude without trying to interject my own kind of thing into the situation, which can kind of drown out and silence them in those moments. But it also provides me something to say when I just have that like real need to, you know, say something and kind of break that awkward silence. So that phrase, thank you for sharing, just allows that to kind of sit and resonate. And ultimately, that's the only thing that you need to say in that moment, because it's like, thank you for sharing. And if you just sit in that space, then it just allows that to just kind of be there for a minute, and then you can kind of move forward. I think the next one is making space. And this one sounds simple, but it's really a challenge to make emotional space as well as physical space. And the context in the book that I talk about is one of the most challenging things we can go through as a partner, from our experience of it, just looking through from our perspective, is the worst case scenario, I call it in the book, is when you're engaged in sexual activity with somebody who has a history of trauma around sexual violence, and they have a triggering event in the midst of sexual activity. And you go from being aroused, kind of, you know, marching towards that incredible orgasmic finish line, and there's all that anticipation, and your emotions are in this one, moving in this one direction, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's just 180 degrees in a completely different situation. And, you know, I do something in the book where I take a snapshot of that moment and really kind of focus in on the emotional swing that really is. And like, really, if we take a moment to like really kind of honor all of the emotions that we're feeling in that moment, and how clustered they all are, and how we're, you know, most of us are not trained, you know, therapists and psychologists, and yet we're in this one particular moment, which in any other therapeutic setting is like the most high stakes exposure therapy you could do for somebody with this level of trauma. And we're that person having to navigate this situation. And so being able to make emotional space for what is happening, not only with them and their triggering event, but also what's happening with you, and like how what you're going through from kind of this arousal to the disappointment, the frustration, the feelings of guilt and shame that you might have caused this, triggering event, the confusion that may be present, all the way through to the anger and rage of realizing that this person who's hurt your loved one is now causing this situation to be very uncomfortable in your own life. Like, there's just a lot, very complex stuff. And so being able to make that emotional space, as well as understand making physical space, because they may need a little bit of space physically. Maybe it's the other side of the bed, maybe it's the other side of the couch, but what we don't want to do is give too much space. So it's this real kind of Goldilocks situation of finding, like, not too little space. We don't want to smother them and make them feel unsafe and suffocated when they're needing to kind of feel a kind of a sense of their own autonomy. But we also don't want to just like bounce and leave the room and leave them alone to spiral in this kind of guilt and shame or whatever they may be feeling. And so that those ideas, right, of just listening in those moments, making space is a really, really important thing for us as partners to really get comfortable with. It's something that we're not really taught. It's a soft skill that I wish was taught more, which is why I'm out here kind of screaming about it. But I think the third takeaway is checking in. And this is where we kind of turn from being reactionary, which is what we kind of do a lot in our lives anyway, is like kind of wait for something to happen and then just have to react to it in the moment. But checking in actually gives us the opportunity to kind of flip the switch on the trauma a little bit and go, we're going to be more proactive in our mindset now. So what my wife and I did, which is at the very beginning of our relationship, we actually started a weekly checking in on, our day was Sunday, but it's just whatever works for you and your relationship. But we sat down and we literally had hard conversations on purpose. We didn't wait for the hard conversations to need to happen because of something, that moment of tension. We sat down and we said, okay, we're going to break our life up into all of these different sections so that we can have the really challenging conversations in a time where the emotions aren't peaked, So we would break it up into our friends. Are we doing the things that we did as friends? Are we laughing and going out and going to shows and movies and just having fun and, engaging with community on our own and with each other and those kinds of things? And then roommates, like just the subtle things when we live together, like, the chores and all of those tasks, like let's have those conversations on purpose so they don't stack. And then when it comes to, kind of romantic lovers conversation, we can actually sit down now and address the trauma and say, hey, listen, when you do this, like a lot of the conversation was, when you do this or when this situation happens, it makes me feel a certain way. Like, this is something that I think could help mitigate these feelings. One of the examples I give in the book is one of my wife's triggers early on was because of the smell of this guy's genitals when he kind of raped her mouth. It just seared into her brain in this very traumatic way. And so anytime that she was, giving me oral sex, there was this just like, she just couldn't do it. It was just one of those things that would just constantly cause a trigger. And so one of the ways that we stepped through kind of looking at the role of exposure therapy and how beneficial it can be was we just did it in the shower to mitigate the smell. And it was one of those things that like really helped. And we learned that through those moments of checking in, where she had the ability to kind of address this thing that had kept coming up. And that's really why I give the credit to how far we've come in our relationship, not just through the trauma recovery, but just the relationship in general with all the other complexities. Checking in is one of those incredibly useful skills.
Let me ask you, from a partner's perspective, what do you do? Because you're human and you are an amazing human being. How do you handle times when you get frustrated? Because you're human. I mean, I'm sure in the beginning there were times that you were frustrated because you didn't go through it yourself. I mean, yes, absolutely, you're going through it in your own way and you're there for her. But I mean, she went through that. And, I tell everybody that even like when you're sexually assaulted, part of you is taken from you that night that you will never get back. Part of you is murdered that night. Like you will never ever get it back. And as a partner, you had to have time where you were frustrated. And it might not have been at her, it might have been at, I can't, do what she needs right now. What am I doing wrong? Or what can I do better to make things better for her? How did you deal with your own frustration in the beginning? Because it had to be hard for you too.
Yeah. That is a huge part of being a partner, is
Mhm.
being able to process the frustrations that come up, because, and this is kind of a complex situation in terms of the frustration, because there's many different contexts in which frustration comes up, because you can be sexually frustrated in a moment because a sexual experience gets triggered, and now what you thought was you had planned for being this romantic night turns into something else, and now it's tears and trauma, and that can be pretty frustrating
Sure.
when in the beginning it's happening on a pretty frequent basis. But processing that in the moment of really focusing on, one of the things that helped me the most was focusing on my breath. I know it sounds simple, but it really is a very powerful tool for the moment, right? Because rather than having frustration be this kind of abstract idea, if we think about it in the moment, you're just heightened emotionally, and you're really making the situation about you. And when I could frame it and realize that, no, each one of these healing situations, like it has to become like an honor and a privilege to be the one that's there walking with her through this exposure therapy, because there is no one else out of 8 billion people on the planet, doctors and therapists. They're not, I can't, it's not like we're tag teaming in, like,
Right.
oh, we have a triggering event, can you take this over? Like, I'm having to be there to be that person. And so, I have to figure out ways to really self-regulate, and that's one of the biggest skill sets I talk about in the book. It's a large one, but it is a really important one, to be able to self-regulate. And what that means practically, just one example, is breathing exercises, which is like the box breathing, kind of breathing in, filling up your stomach, you know really feeling that full breath, more so in your stomach than you do in your kind of chest and shoulders. And then once you hold it for a count of four, and then you release it for a count of four. And it's just a way to focus and concentrate on something else besides yourself and your emotions. Like, it just helps you to self-regulate in that moment and pull yourself out of the frustration that you may be feeling, give yourself something else to focus on, and having a plan for that. And that's what really, I think, helped. It provided a lot of value for us, was having a plan and recognizing that, okay, these types of triggering events, they are more probable in this moment of sexual activity than they are in just general day-to-day life. So let's have a plan. If one comes up, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed to come up. We don't have a crystal ball. But if it does, both of us in that moment, let's just try this breathing exercises so that we both can self-regulate, so that we know that once the emotions have come down, we've kind of gotten out of the arousal, we've gotten out of the peaks of, and the valleys of guilt and shame, and all of those things have kind of subsided, we can approach having a conversation in a pretty calm way, and then address what happened, so that I know, hey, what was the triggering event that happened there? A story I talk about in the book is, one time I rolled over and kicked a remote control off of the bed, and it slammed into the wall, and it created a really loud sound. And in the moment, I didn't recognize it at all. I was kind of focused on task at hand, but it like shocked her in the moment. And that shock and adrenaline spike, combined with the arousal, combined with my kind of position of power over her, just triggered her body memory in that moment. And so just being able to, boom, instantly kind of click into, okay, let's breathe. Let's take some space. I'll take my side of the bed. You take yours. We breathe. Once we start to kind of like feel a little okay, now we're coming back, and we can actually talk it out and kind of get some resolution.
Your book is so perfectly titled, When Your Partner Says Me Too. And you have to tell everybody, where can they find this?
It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. You can go to my website, ShaunHamilton.com, ShaunHamilton.com. And the links there will lead you to kind of the Barnes and Noble print book or the ebook that you can get if you wanted to get it for digital copy. And then other than that, kind of anywhere you can buy books online, it should be showing up. Yeah, in those different places. I think there's like, I don't know, 15 or 20 different online stores kind of worldwide that you can get it at.
So what's next for you now that you've done this book and you're a voice to be reckoned with? So what's on your agenda now?
Yeah, I think it's more so just really pushing for the advocacy on and the activism side of this is working with organizations that are, you know, working with policymakers to get change made. It's something I really have a strong passion for, because we're not going to see the needle move on this problem until we can handle all aspects of it, meaning the proactive approach to preventing this, as well as really taking steps in the right direction for the recovery aspect of it. And I think that, you know, I've identified that how important I was in my wife's recovery process, that, you know, partners out there, I would, you know, really just lean on you a little bit to just really contemplate how important you really are in that recovery process if you find yourself in this situation. It's an incredibly challenging role. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
A lot of people leave.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. And, you know, there's a lot of sacrifice that has to be made. And you know, and a lot of it is hard to do. It's not, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, oh, it's just super easy and I woke up every day just, you know, loving it all. But it was absolutely worth it, to be honest. Like on the other side of it, the recovery that we've made and the relationship that we have is like, it's so worth it. And it's so possible. And it doesn't have to be a really long time. I know it took me 5 years to write this book, but the recovery process that she's been through, it wasn't having to go to therapy forever. She got, you know, really incredible therapy that's out there that I just want your audience to know is rapid resolution therapy. It is, I will scream it from the rooftops for anybody and everybody that is listening. The man, Dr. John Connolly, who created this modality, I can't speak highly enough of what he's created and brought to the world in terms of mental health therapy. And his mindset is about addressing the hardest challenges that people have gone through and helping them get out of suffering as fast as possible so that they don't have to sit for 20 years in talk therapy just talking about what happened to them. But, you know, 5 sessions, it's, you know, made massive improvement in people's lives. And I've seen it so many times in my wife's life. You know, that's why my wife is a practicing rapid resolution therapist, is because of the drastic impact it made in her life when she was, you know, young. She gave a TED talk in 2013 about her kind of remarkable recovery. She was, you know, seizures up to 9 times a day, in a wheelchair, wearing a helmet. She was narcoleptic and had Tourette's syndrome and dystonia and all these different types of neurological dysfunction.
Your wife did.
Yeah, she was a patient of the Mayo Clinic for over 2 years. In the Mayo Clinic, all the doctors and treatments and protocols, it just made her symptoms worse. And one session of rapid resolution therapy, and she's been seizure free and symptom free ever since. And wow. So she went on to train. Her name is Kristen Rivas. The TED Talk is The Life-Changing Power of Words. And it is, yeah, it's been viewed over, you know, 1.5 million times. And, you know, this team of rapid resolution therapists are by the thousands. They're worldwide, and it's a growing modality that needs all of the support that it can get. And, you know, if you do find yourself struggling with anything, you know, with any type of trauma, it doesn't have to be sexual violence, but just to give you a little more on that, is that Dr. John Connolly started the Institute for Survivors of Sexual Violence to provide kind of that type of therapy for this community. And so it's just something I will, you know, kind of represent to the ends of the earth, because I just believe in it that much.
I cannot thank you enough for sharing with us today. Everything I am certain, was unbelievably important in her journey of healing. And I'm sure she is unbelievably grateful to you for what you're doing and what you have done. I'm going to make sure we have all of your links in our notes so everybody can get a hold of you. And I truly hope you will come back and speak with us again.
Oh, anytime.
You
Anytime.
are fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean, for being with us
Oh,
today.
thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.